All right. Hello again, everyone. Welcome this afternoon. My name is Hayla Alawi, and on behalf of Atmosphere Press, I'm so excited to introduce you to Revolutions, an author event featuring new fiction from Atmosphere Press. Today, we will hear from Cynthia J. Bogard reading from A History of Silence, released March 7th, 2023. B. D'Amato reading from Triskele, released March 9th, 2023. And Beth Harkins reading from The Possibility of Everywhere, Casablanca to Oklahoma City, Kathmandu to Timbuktu, releasing in just over a week on May 1st, 2023. All three authors' books can be purchased from online retailers and from select bookstores. And of course, you can order the books on Atmosphere Press's website at atmospherepress.com/books. Please see the links in the chat. At the end of today's event, we will have time for audience questions. So during the readings, if you have a question for one or more of our authors, go ahead and type it in the chat and I will make sure it gets asked. And then during the reading itself, please stay muted to keep extraneous sound at a minimum. Of course, you can always feel free to use the chat for any praise and comments. And one last note, we at Atmosphere Press appreciate your support today and always. If you have a book manuscript of your own, we would love to read it, so feel free to submit your work to books@atmospherepress.com. Again, thank you so much for tuning in and supporting Cindy, Barbara, and Beth this afternoon. Let's start off with our first reader, who is Cynthia J. Bogard. Cindy has reinvented herself as a novelist after a successful career as a professor of sociology and women's studies at Hofstra University in New York. Born and raised in rural Wisconsin, she's lived in Kuwait, Greece, Mexico, New York, Texas, Vermont, and in Madison, Wisconsin. World traveler, longtime feminist and environmentalist, mid-20th century jazz, and Mother Nature, as well as Greece, are all close to her heart. These days, Cindy lives with her spouse and two rescue dogs in Montpelier, Vermont. Visit www.cynthiajbogard.com for news and other writings by Cindy. A History of Silence is a novel that explores the lives of four women who are unknowingly bound together by one man's violent past. As the lives of these four women intertwine in unexpected ways, each learns the past can't be conquered until it's confronted and its secrets revealed and shared. More will be revealed now by Cindy.
Thanks a lot, Hayla. Hi, everyone. I'm going to be reading two short chapters, one by Maddie, the deceased colleague, and one by the deceased daughter, Jenny. And also, I want to apologize in advance for my Texan accent. The only accent I reliably can produce is Wisconsin. A History of Silence, prologue. Pine Hill Station, Texas, March 1986. Maddie. Professor Johnny Wharton V had finally found the ultimate way to keep us all talking about him. He'd gotten himself murdered, let out all over the expensive Persian rug that graced the floor of his spacious office, stabbed to death with the office scissors, I'd heard from our department secretary, Maria, her voice hushed and excited. He had kept, stupidly, some early Roman-era antiquities and coins in his office. No one knew what had happened to them. Even in death, the man had a huge ego. His funeral had to be held at an architecturally interesting, historically important church built circa 1855. The oldest Southern Baptist church in Pine Hill Station, built by pioneers, or possibly slaves. Johnny wasn't religious as far as I knew, but then I'd gone out of my way not to know him. Johnny's last gift to the living was to make the outsized crowd sit for way too long on straight-backed, cushionless pine pews, sweating in the un-air-conditioned humidity of an unseasonably hot late March in southern Texas. The church still had its tiny original windows, which barely opened. I guess electric fans would have violated historical preservation protocols because there sure weren't any running. I was wearing a black wool dress with mid-length sleeves. It was the only dress I owned in black, and I'd be damned if I was going to buy something new for this. I waved the printed funeral program in front of my face to create a tiny breeze. We weren't even halfway through it yet. Prayer followed eulogy, followed prayer, followed eulogy. Had every single historian of the Roman Empire in the entire nation, aging white men, paunchy and bespectacled all, been invited to wax poetic about Johnny's intellect and academic conquests? On they droned, and on and on. How his books had changed the scholarly interpretation of the Roman Empire. What a dynamic presenter he'd been at conferences. What a wry sense of humor. What a great colleague. What a shame in the prime of his career. It was hard to square these hagiographies with the man I would have characterized a few months ago as a good old boy backslapper type from whom any self-respecting woman would recoil. Not that he had ever paid me, the lone woman in the department for the first 5 years of my internment here, the least bit of attention. I'd been hired the year he'd been on leave, he said to me once, not too subtly. He hadn't opposed granting me tenure, though, I'll give him that. He wasn't the only one who could write a paradigm-changing scholarly work on an important era. My Rethinking the American Century, published in my 3rd year here, still sells well for an academic book. The book made it impossible to deny me tenure. So here I was, stuck in this God-fearing vestige of a bygone era of a town where even our decent-sized university didn't offer insulation from a culture both alien and distasteful to me. I had acted rashly in consenting to come here, but then love often makes for intemperate decision-making. I noticed Roz's black, straightened, shoulder-length hair a few rows ahead of me, distinctive in the sea of blonde bobs and male pattern baldness. She still made my heart clench, even though the price I paid to be her love was exorbitant. After tenure, I was ready to declare myself and my love, to come out of that smothering closet that makes liars out of all of us. And I told Roz so. I'm from here, Maddie, she had gasped. My mama would, and you're white, she finished, as if envisioning the racial consequences of our relationship for the first time. End of discussion. Even now, we kept up the pretense of being only vaguely aware of each other, just 2 colleagues in different departments in a faculty that numbered in the hundreds, never sitting together, never really living together, and certainly no public displays of affection. The feminist movement had been in full swing a decade ago in northern university towns like Madison, where we'd both earned our doctorates, our lesbian professors, the tenured ones at least, coming out with an audacity that would have been impossible only a few years before. Not so in Pine Hill Station. Here we still wore pearls and low heels, shoulder-length hair, and dresses. Yuck. That tiny, unresolved conversation had left Roz so scared she'd run from me, or at least that's what I thought then. I shook my head to clear it of the memories of those terrible months. I'm sure many wondered why I didn't search for a more suitable environment in which to pursue the rest of my academic career. With my broad-voweled Midwestern accent and left-of-center politics, it was more than obvious I didn't fit in here. But I couldn't leave her, and she couldn't leave this place. So here I was, sweltering in black wool, pretending to honor a man I had thoroughly disliked a few months ago and now loathed. Academics in the same department are joined together in something of an old-fashioned marriage, till death do us part. And not even then when it came to Johnny and me. A rivulet of sweat ran down the side of my neck. The coffin lid clicked as it closed for the final time. Why anyone would make their family and friends endure an open casket was beyond me, but Johnny always had an outsized opinion of his tanned and square-jawed good looks. Now the coffin proceeded down the aisle, the bearers members of our university football team with huge shoulders bursting out of their black suits. Then came Johnny's family, his wife, Liz, whom I knew slightly from university functions over the years, and their one daughter, Jenny, in her late teens. Liz looked ethereal and serene in her black Chanel skirt and jacket, her silver blonde hair perfectly coiffed in this heat. Jenny's head bowed and her blonde shoulder-length hair swept in front of her face as she and Liz followed the casket down the aisle. Someone dropped their car keys across the aisle from me with a clang, and Jenny's head snapped up as if it had been gunshot. I gasped as I saw her face. The memories of last fall began to overwhelm me again. Chapter 1, University of Wisconsin-Madison, late August 1985. Jenny. Hey, y'all, I'm your new roommate, I called out, brushing my knuckles against the half-open door without looking inside. My Walkman headphones hung around my neck, and I could hear Cyndi Lauper singing, "Girls Just Wanna Have Fun." I still had on my Varney shades, and I kept them on. I knew how I'd look to the roommate I'd been assigned. My straw-colored hair tied in spiked ponytails all over my head, and a red streak sprayed down the middle of one side. Black nail polish, black leather stud bracelets, a belted "Fuck You Frankie" t-shirt over a black fake leather mini, and black Roman sandals on my feet. I chewed my gum noisily and knocked again. I wanted to get this over with. If I played it cool and mean, whoever they stuck me with this, my sophomore year, would take one look and ask to get moved like last year's model had, or at least they'd leave me alone for the rest of the semester. For confidence, I downed a couple of Valiums a half an hour before. I would be low-key but tough, real tough. I'd have this girl running scared. No response from inside the room, so I sauntered in. "Hey, y'all, it's me, your new roomie." What I saw stopped me cold. They put me in with a black girl. In all the time I spent imagining what kind of dorm mate I'd wind up with this fall at UW-Madison, I never once thought it might be a black girl. UW was mostly a sea of white faces. At my Christian Academy high school, there had been exactly one black girl, and she was 2 years older than me, so I'd never spoken to her. In fact, beyond store clerks and waitresses, I'd never spoken to a black girl my age in my life. She looked up slowly from a textbook she'd been paging through. "What'd you say, girl?" she asked, unfolding her legs and sitting up a bit. I glanced at the number on the door to make sure I had the right room. Yeah, 207, that was the number, all right. I said, "I'm your new roommate." This time it didn't come out so cool. "You did not. You said, 'Hey, y'all.' You wouldn't be from Texas, would you?" She was standing now, a good 5 inches taller than me. She had on bright pink shorts that set off her long, deep round legs. This wasn't going as I had planned at all. "So what if I am?" She started laughing and shook her head. "I don't believe it. I just don't believe it. You aren't one of those John Bircher debutante types, are you? You think a debutante would go to a school like this?" The University of Wisconsin at Madison was a top state school, but it sure wouldn't be where the upper crust in Dallas would send their daughters. Besides, do I look like a debutante? I hurled the words at her, ending my question with a snarl. All the work I'd put into my tough London street look, and she asked me if I'm a debutante. How am I supposed to know what a debutante looks like? You think they let someone like me go to their parties and parade around in one of those frilly chiffon dresses, drinking tea with my little finger stuck out? I just think it's funny that you're from Texas. What's so funny about that? 'Cause, girl, I'm from Texas too. They put both us foreigners in the same room, sort of like a quarantine so we won't infect their Yankee accents. They put us in the same room because they thought we'd have something in common, both being from Texas and all. She looked me over from head to toe and put on an exaggerated Texas drawl. "Yep, we looks like we got lots in common, we do, near to being identical twins, sure enough." She could imitate a good old boy accent with the best of them. "Now, ain't that about the funniest thing you ever heard, girl?" She continued in the same accent and looked down at me, waiting to hear what I did think. Here's my chance. We probably did have nothing in common but Texas. Fling that at her in a smart-ass way, and maybe she'll ask to be moved. Strangely, though, I found myself wondering what she was like. Mostly because I couldn't figure out my next move, I walked around her like she had me. I looked her up and down. She was nice looking, slim and muscular. Her hair was cut in a close-cropped afro, which emphasized her high cheekbones and strong chin. Her large dark eyes were fringed with black lashes, and she had the kind of mouth I guess you'd call sensuous. She was staring back at me. Her eyes looked amused. "Well," I said finally in my best Texan accent, "we're not even close to being identical twins. You're a hell of a lot taller than me. Maybe those housing official people think all Texans are the same height." "You want to tell them they're mistaken?" she asked in her normal voice. "Do you?" My question came out a bit quavery. Surprisingly, I cared what she thought. She looked down at me and my spiked hair. "It's hard for me to tell one way or another, seeing how we haven't been properly introduced yet. You want to try a take two on this?" My plan fizzled. I headed for the door. I shut it behind me and knocked. "Please do come in," she said in polite Texan, opening the door and inviting me inside with a sweep of her slender arm. "Good afternoon, miss," I replied my best Texan drawl. "I do believe you're my new roommate." "How do you do?" she said, laying it on thick. "If this ain't a pleasant surprise. Come in, come in. My name's Leanne Campbell, but folks around here call me Lena. I'd be mighty pleased if you do the same." I shook her offered hand vigorously. "The pleasure is all mine, Miss Lena. My name's Jan Wharton, and I sure am happy to meet you." "You don't look like a Texan," Lena said, dropping the exaggerated accent all at once. Then her face cracked a smile and we both started giggling. "Let's get you unpacked and then we can work on our decor," Lena said, regarding my pile of junk outside the door. "We'll show them what two Texans can do." So much for my mean girl act. Thank you.
That's great.
Thank you, Cindy. I feel like we've felt so much characterization in so little time. And I mean, it's a gripping story. And if anyone here loves reading series in particular, this is a fantastic one to start because the next installment is coming very soon. Well, now we'll go on to our next reader, who is B. D'Amato. Barbara is a psychoanalyst in private practice in New York City. She has written numerous professional papers analyzing the psychic conflicts of literary characters and their authors, i.e. Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, R.L. Stevenson's Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, and Samuel Beckett's Waiting for Godot. Her most recent publication considers the lyrics in Bob Dylan's Murder Most Foul from a hypnagogic perspective. She has written extensively about dreams, adoption, and the curative potential of human interconnection through emotional communication. Triskele is her first work of fiction. Learn more at bdamato.com. In Triskele, a bizarre tragedy drives 10-year-old Paul from his dysfunctional home, leaving his younger sister Bethany behind. Paul flees to his estranged father's apple orchard, where he discovers comfort and parenting for the first time. 2 decades later, the long-lost siblings settle separately in New York City, where a gifted psychoanalyst, Lillian, develops independent relationships with them as all 3 characters search for seemingly unattainable connection while carrying inescapable demons. And with that, let's hear from Barbara herself.
Okay. Hi, everyone. I'm going to introduce you to my 3 interconnected characters with 3 short pieces. New York City, 1981. When the bus finally arrived at Port Authority, it seemed as if an eternity had passed. Actually, it was only 2.5 hours late, but far past her usual dinner hour. So Lillian was famished. She never lingered in the bus station, which seemed extra grimy tonight, and desperately needed to eat after she made a quick stop in the ladies' room. The interminable delay on the bus had made her legs restless. Exercise of any sort was in order. Lillian decided to walk a few blocks through Hell's Kitchen, confident she could find a reasonably decent pizzeria. She had good instincts and she would trust them. On 44th Street and 9th Avenue, she saw a small circle of people gathered around a lively man who was speaking. As she neared, she could see that while he was speaking to the whole group, he was focused on one teenage boy in particular. She could not distinctly hear his words, but she caught hints that it was about salvation. Crossing the street to steer clear of the fray, she noticed the man was a priest. She assumed he was preaching and paid no further mind. On the next corner, she reached her goal, Giacomo's Pizzeria, and ordered a mushroom slice to go. Pulling 4 quarters from her change purse, she placed them on the counter and left with her brown bag. The aroma from the steamy pizza escaped through the bag. She knew she could not wait another minute to eat it. Feeling slightly out of her comfort zone, she went back inside and sat at the first table in the rear of the shop, where she could see the street through the mirrored wall in front of her. There was a young man ordering spaghetti and meatballs and a homeless woman harassing the counter guy for spare change. The customer reached into his pants pocket and gave something to the woman. She kissed his hand, thanking him and Jesus. She smiled at him for one more lingering moment and then walked out. As Lillian was wiping her mouth with a napkin and considering a second slice, the man who had been ordering at the counter sat down at the next table with his pasta. It was the priest who had been proselytizing 2 blocks back on 9th Avenue. She could see up close in the fluorescent light of the pizza shop that he was much younger than he appeared across the wide street in the dimming shadows of dusk. His face was compelling. He had short, thick, curly black hair and an angular face with a strongly chiseled nose and high cheekbones. He looked intelligent and confident, and at the same time like a little boy. Except for the white collar around his neck, she might have mistaken him for a teenager. Lillian was trying not to stare when he looked up and caught her eye. "Evening, ma'am," he said, putting another forkful of pasta into his mouth. Lillian felt self-conscious about how she was scrutinizing him and thought she should leave. She smiled at him and turned her glance away. Opening her shoulder bag, she checked for subway tokens in her change purse. She could not find one. She'd have to purchase some and wanted a small bill ready in hand to make the transaction once down in the subway station. After further rummaging through her bag and searching every compartment for her wallet, she realized it was gone. Oh God, had she been pickpocketed on the bus or in the ladies' room or down the block when she was moving away from the crowd? Diverting attention with a commotion, was this priest here part of that scam that distracted people who they could then rob? Had he just stolen her wallet? Was he even a priest? Now she was mad. Lillian asked the priest, "What denomination are you, Father?" "Me?" asked the priest as he looked up from his meal. "I'm a Roman Catholic deacon, and in a few months I'll be a Roman Catholic priest." "Can you prove it?" Lillian said curtly. "Why do you need proof?" the deacon smiled. "Oh, I don't know. Sometimes people pose as clergy to divert others from their real motives." Lillian knew she was being rude, but she continued. "Who wouldn't trust a priest? Could be a very clever decoy." "Ma'am, are you accusing me of something?" the priest said, but his tone remained calm and friendly. Catching herself, Lillian backpedaled. "No, well, yes, but I have no right to. I'm sorry. I seem to have been pickpocketed. My wallet is gone. And I remember seeing you a few blocks back with a group around you. You were, oh, you thought I set up a scam to get your wallet?" He was still smiling. Lillian was so embarrassed she was almost in tears. "I apologize. It's so not like me to accuse a stranger of something that I really have no idea about. I mean, I'm a bit flustered having noticed my wallet's gone. And then seeing you sitting here did seem like a bit of a coincidence. So I put 2 and 2 together and seem to have come up with 5. I'm so sorry. Please accept my apology, Deacon." Lillian stood up. "I should go." "Where will you go without any money, ma'am?" "Oh, good question. I don't even have a token to get me home, which is all I really need right now. I only have 47 cents. Can I get you a token?" Can I get you a token? The deacon stood and extended his hand. "I'm Deacon Paul O'Malley, and I'd be happy to get you some tokens back at the mission. It's just up the street." Lillian reached for his hand. Dr. Lillian Mitchell here. Her mind was still racing. Maybe he was worse than a thief. He wanted her to go with him to his mission in Times Square to get tokens. She was not born yesterday. Maybe he was a murderer, rapist, or worse. She saw him watching her, but for some reason she did not have a bad feeling about him. In fact, she liked him. He did appear to be trustworthy, but maybe that's because he was just really good at his con. He pulled out a card from his pocket and presented it to Lillian. It read, "Deacon Paul O'Malley, Interim Director, Big Brothers Home and Mission, Services and Shelter for Homeless Boys," on and on and on. Lillian flipped the card over and looked up at the deacon. "I don't know what to believe, My training tells me not to trust you, but my gut tells me you're legitimate. And right now, I'm just apprehensive. You don't have to trust me, O'Malley said. And what training would that be that you're listening to? Oh, I'm a psychoanalyst. Well, almost. You could say I'm training to become an expert in understanding human behavior, character, and motivation. And at this instant, I'm not certain about what your motives are, even though I have a trusting feeling for you. A shrink? O'Malley asked. Lillian laughed. Yes, a shrink. Now, maybe it's me who should be scared, said the deacon. Of what? I don't scam people, Lillian said. Yeah, but don't shrinks know how to read minds? Come on, tell me right now. What am I thinking right now? His words demanded, yet he smiled broadly. This is one crazy chick here, she said, and I'd better get away from her as soon as possible. No, I'm not thinking that at all. I actually do have a mission, and I'd be happy to get you a few tokens. I seem to have given my last bit of change to that homeless woman at the counter. If you're nervous, you can wait outside, or I can have my intern bring them down to you. Or if it makes you feel safer, just wait here and I'll come back. Lillian relaxed. Okay, I'd be happy to take a few tokens from your mission, and I think I can walk around the corner with you. Okay, we're still in 1981 in New York City. On to the next character. Beth walked into class and sat in the first row, a few seats to the right of the podium. Dr. Claudette Corey entered, dimmed the lights, clicked on the first slide, and began her lecture. Titian has been called the greatest Venetian artist of the 16th century. His name is Tiziano Vecellio, and what we are looking at is the Assumption of the Virgin. It was his first major public commission, and it put him on the map as a serious painter in Venice. It was not without controversy. As you can see, the Virgin Mary is twisting and turning, her arms gesticulating. She's not the serene, humble, bow-headed Madonna, but a more emotional, demanding presence. Many of the faithful took issue with this portrayal of her. A thud sounded through the room. It sounded like someone dropping a stack of textbooks in the front row. This momentarily distracted Dr. Corey. She looked toward the source of the sound briefly before she continued. The apostles below are riveting, moving, flailing, which is a deviation from the norm. Titian, it would seem, liked to stir things up. He was a creative individual, very talented colorist. Again, an interruption, a spilled coffee cup, and an accompanying shriek. Corey raised the lights and looked down the front row. There she saw Beth Camarera, wiping up coffee with a pile of napkins. For heaven's sakes, Miss Camarera, you know eating and drinking are prohibited in these lecture halls. First the avalanche of textbooks, and now the coffee cascade. What next? The class laughed. I don't find this amusing. Please leave your things and step out of my lecture hall at once. I will meet with you after class in my office, 4 o'clock sharp. I'm sorry, Professor Corey, Beth said. I will try. Try nothing, Corey said. Go now. I don't want to leave and miss the lecture. You can go, or I can call campus security. My suggestion is that you go willingly. That is, if you ever want to complete your studies at this university. Corey was now glaring. The class stared in utter silence. Beth rose from her seat, left her belongings, and walked up toward the rear of the room, swaggering her hips and swinging her long blonde hair. She held her head high and told herself Professor Corey was jealous of her talent and her good looks. There were another 90 minutes before the class would end. She went directly to the library and found the tall, handsome, and extremely well-built maintenance guy, Rollo. She asked him if he was free to help her with a jam lock in the ladies' room. Rollo knew Beth. He had helped her before, on several occasions. He looked around and saw his coworker, Jeremy. He told him he'd be back in a few minutes. This was Jeremy also knew Beth. He smiled and nodded. Today wasn't Jeremy's lucky day. Exactly at 4:03, Beth arrived and sat outside Dr. Corey's office, waiting to be scolded or perhaps worse. She was not sure what Corey might say. She told herself she didn't care. She knew, however, that she did indeed care, and she'd have to make this right. She also knew Lillian would be very disappointed in her. Oh, the hell with her too, Beth thought. At 4:27, the office door swung open, and Claudette stepped inside the reception area. She did not acknowledge Beth, but went straight to the receptionist. My office, and bring a pad and a pen for dictation. The two disappeared into the private room. Beth thought she should leave, but told herself to calm down. She could handle Dr. Claudette Corey. After another few minutes, Lisa emerged and told Beth that Corey was ready to see her. Beth stood up and slowly walked into the office. Balancing her glasses on the bridge of her nose, Claudette began. You have two choices before you. You either sign this or leave the department and the university. What? What is this? Beth felt dazed and confused. If this is about what happened in class, I am so sorry. Accidents are not a part of this conversation. There's a protocol to be followed in my lecture hall and at this university. You can either follow it or find another institution. There's a code of conduct demanded of students. I have no time for kindergarten games, Miss Camarera. Is that clear? A formal typewritten document will be given to you outside, Claudette said, pointing to the corridor. She continued in her businesslike fashion. Sign this document now and another copy for your academic file on your way out. Stop at the receptionist's desk and she will apprise you of the exact protocol. Any other questions about the details, you can speak to her. Good day, Miss Camarera. Something clicked inside and Beth suddenly realized the magnitude of her behavior. There were consequences to her actions and she was about to face them. Was this what Lillian had been trying to help her with for all this time? Am I being expelled? Beth asked as she rose from her chair. Not yet, but give me one more chance and I surely expect that you'll be out for good. Okay, third character. We're going back in time, 1963, Westchester County. At the White Plains bus depot, Paul found it was pretty straightforward. A large board announcing the destinations, and Oswego was indeed one of them. Next to the bus number, he saw the word departed. Paul had just missed the bus. He went to the ticket agent at the window and asked when the next coach to Oswego would be leaving. Not today, the old man said curtly without looking up from his newspaper. When is the next bus, sir? Tomorrow morning. Paul sank in mild disbelief. 1,000 questions raced through his head. I need one ticket to Oswego, sir, Paul said as his eyes studied the geometric shapes of the marble countertop, his mind pressing with the problem of where he might spend the night. Round trip or one way? One way. $4.25, the agent said. Paul reached into his bag for the cash his mother had placed there and handed a bill to the disinterested agent. Departs on time, 7:15 a.m. sharp, gate number 5, son. He pointed to the rear of the station as he pushed the change across the counter. Don't want to be late or you'll miss it. We aim for on time, he said plainly. Paul thanked the clerk without making eye contact and stared at the voucher in his hand, which read Oswego, New York. He glanced around the dingy halls and took a seat on the wooden benches. There was another half day and a full night before his bus departed. He wondered if he should go back home. Maybe he could sneak back into the house and sleep there, then dodge out again in the morning. No, he'd have to find some place to hide until morning. Paul remembered what he had done to his room. It would not even be possible to sleep there. Maybe someone had already telephoned the police. What if the cops were out cruising for him now? It probably made sense not to go any place where he might be recognized or run into somebody. Paul closed his eyes and told himself, just think. A movie, yeah, a double feature. That could easily kill 4 hours. He had all that money. Double checking his pockets, he felt reassured. Right now it was 2:20 p.m. The White Plains Cinema was about 12 blocks away. Okay, I can do this, he said aloud. He walked slowly and sadly toward the exit. He pulled down his Yankee cap to shield his face more and felt that within his knapsack, he was carrying the weight of the world. Anyone seeing him from behind might have mistaken him for an old man. On the short journey to the theater, anxious thoughts flooded Paul's mind. He walked with his head held low, occasionally glancing from side to side. He saw his reflection in the glass windows of the shops as he passed familiar storefronts, like the Army-Navy store, where Mom bought jeans, Woolworth, where they sometimes bought notebooks for school, 7-Eleven, where Mom always bought beers and milk. All seemed alien. Paul was trying to think about nothing so he could avoid feeling anything. He knew it would not take much to unleash a torrent of tears, and to cry was out of the question right now. He needed to be strong so he could reach his goal, which at this moment in time was the movie theater. Then he remembered Beth. Who would pick her up from school? Considering all possibilities, Paul knew his mom would get Bethany, or at least get a neighbor to fetch her. Angela wasn't that bad. At the same time, he felt a strange sense of relief that he was free, even if he had no intimation of where his trek might lead him. He also thought he would surely burn in hell. Thank you.
Thank you, Barbara. This is another book with just so many different emotional points in such a short reading. I think that just shows how dynamic these stories are. And I also saw this comment about these spot on references. So definitely, yes, this book is landing. It's just so wonderful to see the response to this. Um, all right, so our final reader for today is Beth Harkins. Beth is an inspiring author, storyteller, workshop leader, and world traveler who has crossed 6 continents, 65 countries, including the USA, while gathering women's stories, the ones that headlines miss. A founding member of the Woman-Centered Coaching, Training, and Leadership Institute, Beth also holds a master's degree in humanistic psychology. She applies her training, life experience, and passion for the power of story to her writing. A mother, grandmother, widow, and wild, wise woman, Beth lives in Dallas, Texas, surrounded by family, friends, books, and treasures from around the world. Contact her at bethharkinswrites@gmail.com and visit her website at www.bethharkins.com. In The Possibility of Everywhere, main character Cindy encounters Duende and the mysticism of Saint Teresa of Avila in Spain. As a jet-setting Pan-American stewardess, she discovers the influence of Isis in Egypt. From fierce and tender Kali in Nepal, from strong voices heard beneath a mango tree in Kenya, from wild hearts met along the backroads of the USA, Cindy senses feminine power rising as a transforming balm. To hear more about this journey, I will hand things over to Beth.
Thank you so much, Hala, and thank you to all of you for being here. I feel so strongly about the power of story, about your story, my story, and our story. It was a motivation for my writing. I'm reading from the first chapter, and this is beginning, while the book covers decades and continents, it's beginning with the protagonist at a young age, referring to how we begin forming our stories by how we tell them to ourselves. Casablanca, French-occupied Morocco, 1953. From a spot in the shade of the banana tree, I sat and watched Vatna grip a silver sewing needle between her thumb and index finger. She bent her knees and lowered herself onto a cushion of bumblebee yellow grass. From a tangled ball, she threaded a needle the way I'd watched Mother do before stitching a torn hem. I sat up as straight as the bangs across my forehead. With my eyes closed, I waited for a miracle while inhaling the scent of bougainvillea draped on a trellis at the front of my family's white stucco house. I remembered earlier in the day soaking up the sun as I ran in circles around the yard. Me, Cindy Hollingsworth, a 6-year-old, green-eyed, freckled-faced, Scotch-Irish American girl with brown bangs and plenty of attitude. I joined Vatna, a chocolate-eyed, tanned-skinned Moroccan Muslim with middle-parted hair and lots of spunk. Aged 10 or so, Vatna lived in a garage apartment with Huda, a Moroccan housekeeper. Vatna spoke Arabic. I spoke English. Together, we spoke girl talk. I adored my special friend with her earrings and the things she knew, even though she couldn't go to school like I did. Vatna followed me as I flapped my arms like a butterfly. Vatna, pretty please, I pleaded. I want to be a queen today. You can choose who you want to be tomorrow. Vatna's dangling earrings bobbled up and down as if to say, okay. I pretended to be Queen Elizabeth of England on her coronation day. My middle name was Elizabeth, making it easy to imagine I was a queen making important decisions before dashing off to grand balls, wearing a satin gown and earrings. Later, I pretended to be powerful Queen Cleopatra, and then the Egyptian goddess Isis. I knew their stories because Mother had read them to me. Queens and goddesses wore earrings. That's why I needed them. Mother had insisted, wait until you're older. Your father doesn't want to see you wearing earrings at your age. I needed earrings so that I could look beautiful and so everyone, including my father, would realize how important I was. As Vatna and I played, I pointed to her ears with beads from them. Then I pointed to my ears. Soon, Vatna disappeared before returning with a sewing needle, brown thread, and 2 tiny sky blue stone beads. With the magic objects spread on the ground, we sat huddled together looking at them, shaded by the banana tree. Soon, Vatna leaned towards me as she squeezed my earlobe between her fingers. I felt a sharp pain and wanted to yell, stop. Instead, I sat motionless. Vatna then squeezed my other earlobe as an even sharper pain pierced through me. Bees buzzing around the bougainvillea broke the silence I did not allow myself to break. That's when I raised my hands to my ears, moving my fingers down the threads. I could feel 1 round bead dangling from each ear. Thank you, I said, standing up to grab Vatna's hand as I pulled her toward the house. Like ballerinas dancing to the Sugar Plum Fairy, Vatna and I floated through the open front door, moving across the tile floor, down the hall, and into my parents' bedroom. When we arrived at the tall mirror hanging above the dresser, I saw my earrings dangling. Excited, I didn't notice Mother napping on the bed. Jarred awake by our disruption, she sat up, stretched, and turned towards the mirror. I heard a gasp before Mother's glare landed on me and then fell onto Vatna. Vatna, did you pierce Cindy's ears? Germs, Cindy's ears can get infected. Sensing Mother's distress, but not understanding her words, Vatna stood in silence. Her eyes looked down. With her lips quivering, she raced from the room. The response set darts to my heart. Vatna did nothing wrong. I wanted earrings and she gave them to me. I got Vatna in trouble. Hold still, Mother ordered. I squirmed to get away. From deep in my throat came my favorite word, the one Mother had told me was an ugly word little girls must not say. I folded my arms, stomped my foot, and yelled, damn, damn, damn. I'd heard Daddy say that powerful word many times. Straighten up, be sweet and nice. Your father will be home soon, Beth. I squirmed as my mother retrieved silver scissors from her sewing basket. With my jaw clenched, I felt the cold scissors graze past my cheek and up to the thread and the bead hanging from the earlobe. I heard scratching scissors open and close before a ping sounded. The first bead hit the floor, disappearing like lost treasure in the ocean. Another snip and the other beads suffered the same fate. When Mother pulled the threads from my earlobes, I shouted, my earrings, they make me special. Touching my face, Mother tried to calm me. You're special just as you are, she said. Her words brought no comfort. Mother left and returned with a small bottle from the medicine cabinet. I knew what was coming. She poured orange-brown liquid onto a cotton ball and rubbed it across my earlobes. I felt a sting like a burn from popping grease. Ouch, I yelled to get her attention. Iodine kills germs, Mother said with the cotton ball held between her fingers. At that moment, my 3-year-old sister, Sarah, dashed into the scene of my disaster. She clutched her Betsy McCall doll and looked around. Mother locked her eyes on me. Why don't you and Sarah play with your dolls like you did on the ship? I sulked and began to play a pretend version of the real voyage. A year earlier, when Mother, Sarah, and I took a train from Oklahoma City to New York before boarding the SS Constitution for a cruise from New York to Gibraltar, Spain. From there, we had taken a smaller ship to Tangier before landing in Casablanca. With commercial jet travel, a rather new thing, the train and the ships provided the best options for uniting Mother, Sarah, and me with Air Force Lieutenant Colonel James Archibald Harkins. Mother's much missed husband, and our much missed father. Since there was no place for us to live on the base, it had taken Daddy a long time to find a home. And now we would be settling in. On this day in Casablanca, having agreed to play dolls with my sister, I wasn't too worried about pleasing my mother, but pleasing my father was as important as pleasing God Almighty. If I acted sweet and nice and played dolls with Sarah, Mother might not tell Daddy I'd yelled a bad word. Grabbing my Madame Alexander doll and dragging her by the hair down the hall, I wanted to scream. Soon I heard the door open and footsteps sounded in the hall. I looked up and saw my father, dressed in his olive green Air Force uniform. He stood tall, the brass buttons and bright medals gleamed on his jacket. I imagined Daddy bending down, scooping me into his arms and squeezing me tight. He'd never done those things, but today he might pinch my cheeks and say in his deep voice, "You're my special little girl." I guess Daddy had important things on his mind because he didn't say one word. His eyes went through me as if I were cellophane covering the orange slices Mother kept for him in the refrigerator. I followed Daddy into the living room where he dropped into his rocking chair, picked up his newspaper, and disappeared behind it. I became nobody special. A girl as useless as the tooth fairy without money. I chewed around my thumbnail. The raw skin bled. I wished the throbbing would cover something worse. The hidden pain a Band-Aid could not cover. That evening, my father invited fellow officers to our house. I wished Daddy would let me sit beside him to hear the important things the men were discussing. Instead, I was forced to sit outside the door, hidden and invisible. I couldn't talk, only peek in silence through a crack in the door of a smoke-filled room. I strained to hear what was said about their work at Noursour Air Base, about bombers pointed at the Soviet Union. I heard the officers say some people in Morocco didn't want girls to go to school. I couldn't imagine why anyone would say such a thing. Later, I heard the words riots, strikers, and massacres before one officer said, French soldiers killed 50 Moroccans. I was terrified. Would the French soldiers shoot Vatna and Huda? If not, would Vatna get to go to school? I ran to the kitchen to ask Mother to explain. She looked at me, at Sarah, then down at the floor and said, it means a hard life for Vatna and Huda. I was worried and sad, but Mother told me, let's enjoy the mountains, the oceans, the desert. Weeks later, remembering Mother's words, I looked out the window of our family's car as we crossed desert lands. I watched two nomads covered in long white robes slap their camels' rumps to force them down the side of the road. Behind them, donkey cart drivers used their sticks to force the poor creatures to clump along as we sped by. I could tell by the way the camels and donkeys lowered their heads that being forced to obey did not please them any more than it pleased me. I asked, when will we be there? Before I got the answer, I saw the city of Marrakesh appear, a rose-colored desert in an oasis where the sun made snow-covered Atlas mountains sparkle. After we checked into our hotel, my mind turned toward Jama al-Fina Square, a magical space. Swirling belly dancers made music with finger cymbals, fire eaters swallowed fire, and a fortune teller with dancing monkeys told customers their futures. I wanted to know my future, but Daddy said, without looking at me, no one knows what the future will bring. Mother stood behind Daddy without adding her thoughts. Outside a blue-tiled mosque, robed men removed their backless, pointed-toed leather slippers before entering carved wooden doors. No women went inside. The men had come to pray, called by wailing muezzins. I wondered why women weren't called to pray. When the end of a mesmerizing weekend in Marrakesh arrived, I rode along in comfort while Daddy drove us back to Casablanca until Sarah started bugging me something awful. Let's play dolls, she begged. No dolls, I told her. I want to look out the window. Sarah kept pestering me. I reached over and pinched her arm with my fingernails. She screamed. Daddy jerked his neck around and yelled, "Stop it, Cindy." It was strange to hear him say my name, but I didn't like the tone in his voice. I watched as my father jerked his head back toward the front windshield. In a minute, he held his hand around one side of his neck while he drove the car to the side of the road and stopped, put on the brake. "You drive," he told Mother as he got out of the car to move to the passenger side. Sarah and I sat as silent as dead people while Mother started driving. I should have known better than to pinch my sister. Now, Daddy couldn't even drive the car. It was all my fault. Soon the world I had known disappeared the way an Arab woman's face disappears behind a veil. Daddy came home one day and told Mother, "Morocco's ready to explode. More bombing, shooting, and protest." He loosened his tie and added, "The base commander had ordered us to leave Oklahoma City now." Mother packed her bags. Daddy loaded the car. We rushed to the airport. Vatna watched and drew a two-thumbed hand in the sand. I asked Mother about the hand. "It's a symbol of Fatima," she told me as she shoved a suitcase in the back seat. "Who's Fatima?" I asked. "She's a goddess who guides people through difficulty," Mother explained. I waved goodbye, wishing with all my might for Fatima's hand to guide us all. From someplace inside me, I remembered my lost dream about becoming a goddess. It would have been wonderful to guide people through difficulty. Our family left Casablanca, huddled inside what Daddy said was a Douglas C-54 non-pressurized transport plane. My stomach lurched. This was my first airplane ride. It scared me to climb into the sky, unsure what would happen next. Sitting on a cold metal bucket seat, I had to face away from the windows. I couldn't see the moon, the stars, or last sight of Morocco. I wondered if I would ever see Vatna again. Would she be safe in Morocco? Would she ever get to go to school? Would I ever wear earrings again? Would girls in Oklahoma City insist on playing with dolls instead of imagining themselves as queens or goddesses? And why had I never heard of a queen or a goddess who lived in Oklahoma? And what did Mother mean when she said, "I had sand in my shoes when I didn't see any"? I was not very smart, or I would be able to figure out more things.
Thank
And
you
so the
so
first
much,
chapter.
Beth. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, and so the first chapter of that story ends.
Thank you so much. I actually just as you were reading right in front of me, the hand of Fatima that my grandma gave me when I was a kid is like right in front of me. So a little moment of connection there. But yeah, thank you so much. I love your use of anecdotes and really communicating this broader message and theme with that. So thank you for sharing that with us. So we have about 10 minutes for our audience Q&A. So if any of you in the audience, including authors, if you have a question for one or more of our authors today, go ahead and type that in the chat and I will make sure it gets asked. So I'll give it a couple minutes for people to be generating those questions, but I actually wanted to pose a question first to Beth and Cindy, specifically about writing with a message. How do you write a story that's intended, or at least to some degree, communicates a message or social meaning? Both of your books have these really powerful themes of feminism, and I know also, Cindy, anti-racism was important for you to write about. So maybe, Cindy, if you wanted to start us off with this one.
Well, I'm a sociologist, so it's sort of in my blood, in my training. And one of my mentors was actually here early on. She had to leave early, but Judith Tanner is one of my mentors. So thank you for coming, Judith. So I can't help myself. And I guess I feel as a novelist, it's my mission to write stories that have messages, especially for women who need to hear them. So it's in my bones to write social novels, and that's my intention to continue.
Yeah, definitely. Almost like this unignorable drive, it sounds like.
Yes.
Beth, I'd love to hear from you a similar or the same question. What are you thinking about that?
Right. For decades, I have been very driven to understand really what is the feminine. And so it was my personal search for understanding that. And then as I traveled the world, I saw the feminine rising in many forms. So I had no choice except to try to put that in a way on the page without being heavy-handed about it, because it was an exploration that I felt compelled to write about.
Yeah, definitely. These like personal experiences informing that, I think a lot of us can really connect with that feeling, that idea. We did have another question come in. This is a question for Barbara. How has your career as a psychoanalyst informed the writing of Triskele, where obviously one of the main characters and the background, or I guess premise for the book has to do with that psychoanalysis?
100%. I guess my idea in the book was to talk about unconscious motivation and how people repeat things that have been done to them, and how people seek out what they really, really want, and how these three characters find each other in some way that's curative to all of them. So 100%, human motivation is something that I'm very, very fascinated with. And that comes in handy when you're writing a novel.
Yeah, definitely. It's such a I guess it's not like a completely different form of writing, but it is, it's different from your background in writing. So it's really
It's much
fascinating
more fun.
to see. Oh, good. I'm happy to hear that. Or at least for all of our behalves, I'm happy to hear that. We have a question from Betty to Beth. I think you sort of also already answered this in part, Beth, but is your story a memoir?
Genres can be overlapping. I call my writing an autobiographical novel. It certainly draws the truths of my life, and it's so close to it that even when I was reading and the character of a father, close to my own father, I switched his name when I was reading it from the changed name of Hollingsworth into the name of Harkins. So it's intertwined.
Mm.
And it's
There you
perfect
go.
for my truths.
Yeah. If anyone in the audience is familiar with this term, autofiction really comes to mind with Beth's book. And so I always love stories like that, because you can feel how informed it is by lived experience, but still there's like this creativity element to it. We have a question from Sandy to Cindy. Cindy or Cynthia, could your novel be written in a 2023 setting?
Maybe not, and for a good reason. I think a lot of the issues that I grapple with in the novel, what it means to be a closeted lesbian, for example, the racial issues, which I don't want to say too much about because I don't want to give the plot away. We're a little further along in at least acknowledging the existence of these issues and dealing with them, and especially maybe the LGBTQ community has come quite a long way through activism, I might point out, in every case. So maybe not. And also, I have to say the 80s have such an advantage because there's no cell phones or even computers. So people can get lost and you're not always available. And for a novelist, I find that comforting and fun more than, you know, having to have people texting each other. People do it, they do it successfully. I'm not sure that that's the way I could do it. So I wouldn't want it to be written in the current, although certainly the issues I bring up echo completely. And in fact, Black Lives Matter was a huge inspiration to this work. So they, you know, there are echoes, but I'm glad I said it in the 80s.
Definitely. I think there's something to be said for how much so many of the just themes of the book resonate now in 2023, but definitely interesting to hear that really it needs to be set when it was set. So we now have a question from Jenny to Beth. I'm wondering if Beth could share more about how she connected to St. Teresa of Avila through her writing in this book and the message there.
Right. As I started thinking about an experience in my life, you know, I'd never been, personally, I was raised in a Protestant background. I mean, really never knew anything about saints, but I did live a year in Spain, and it was an introduction to really to the area of mysticism. And what was most fascinating to me about Santa Teresa de Avila is the understanding of an interconnection of eminence with something that I was trying to come to understand, an interconnection with the divine. And so that's where my fascination came from. And I was exploring that through that, and also in Sufi mysticism later in the book, and finding that mystical element through many, many different traditions, and that it was the immanence rather than transcendence was a thing I was playing around with there.
Yeah, definitely. And again, just hearing how these life experiences have informed the work, I just think it's really such a intriguing sort of thing to draw you into the book.
And I have to add one quick thing, even though I know we're going over
Sure.
time, but the fascination of how she was so ahead of her time as a woman, and how she would speak her truth, and how she managed. She could have been killed during the period of time, and for her outspokenness. And so that was the other thing that was hugely inspiring to me.
Oh, totally. Yeah. And that's another thing that can really resonate in the modern day, even though this is set, you know, years and years ago. Some
In the
food
Middle
for
Ages.
thought. I just want to have one more question before we wrap up for the afternoon. This is a question for Barbara. Your book seems to be exploring issues of trust. Can you say more about that? Your inspirations, or how you developed that, or how that came up maybe?
It's such a good question. Trust. Who trusts anybody nowadays? I think the thing about human connection is that we all long for that. We all long to trust someone. We all long to know that there's someone there who can be there for us. And each of these three characters had issues with that. But again, without giving away anything further, as the book progresses, they do come to find that. And I think that's an important thing for us as individuals and as humans, to be able to trust someone. That's sort of a universal longing for people, to know that someone is there that you can count on.
Yeah, one of those sort of things that you can endlessly think upon and just, you know, theorize about. And yeah, you're so right. It's such a human desire.
Mhm.
All right. So with that, I just want to say to all three of our authors, thank you so much for being generous here with us today, with sharing your stories, but also your thoughts on these questions, and just all the work that's gone into these books. So thank you so much to Cindy, to Barbara, and to Beth for being here with us today. And also, as always, thank you so much to the audience for celebrating these writers with us as well. It's so wonderful to see people uplifting art in their communities. So don't forget that you can order A History of Silence, Triskele, and The Possibility of Everywhere from the links in the chat. And please also consider checking out atmospherepress.com to browse our new and forthcoming releases, to sign up for our email newsletter, or to submit a book manuscript of your own. Feel free to submit your work to books@atmospherepress.com and let us know that you attended today's event. We'll look forward to hearing from you, but other than that, that's it. So have a great close to your weekend, everyone.
Bye,
Thank you,
everyone.
everyone, for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Absolutely.
Laura,
Thanks for
for
your time.
hosting us. Thank you.
Thanks, Paula.
Thanks to my other authors too. Great to hear your words.
It's fun to be with you. Thank you.